Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. DJ here, hands-on SAP Dev with QMacro. Thank you so much for joining. It's a cold, grey morning this morning here in Manchester. But that's okay because my CPU fan is so loud. I'm just monitoring the CPU. I have no idea what's going on at the moment, but the CPU is at 50%. I'm not sure what's going on, but we'll carry on anyway. So yes, thank you for joining. Good morning. I'm going to look up here to my screen just over there. Good morning, Napheat. Looking forward to SAP Inside Track Chandigarh tomorrow morning. You and I can talk about that later. I'm all set. And yeah, good morning, Tim, TJRP. And thank you for the tip on Wednesday about the pace alarms. I found a virtual pacer as well. I'm basically what I'm trying to do is run a little bit slower for various reasons. And I've set some, Tim told me about pace alarms that you can set on here. My only problem was that I set my window between, I want to run no faster than this and no slower than this. I set my window too small, only 10 seconds. It's really hard to run consistently for a distance, within a 10-second window, plus or minus 5 seconds. So I'm going to set it wider next time. So yeah, thanks Tim, and great to see you on the live stream again. Good morning, Christian. Good morning, Helmut. Good morning, Srikanth. Antonio Del Negro. Good morning, sir. To Frankfurt, I guess. Good morning, Henrik. Good morning, Gregor. Lupomania. Oh, can everybody else hear me? Is it just Helmut that can't hear me? Let me know. Audio is okay. Thanks, Christian. That's great. So let's get started. The CPU is still 50%. It's just ridiculous. I always do this anyway. I've got one of those sort of yellow highlighter pens, big thick pen, and I wedge it under the MacBook so that it's got a little bit of air to circulate. But it's still, obviously that's not going to help the CPU, but it will help the fan hopefully do a better job. I've no idea what's going on, but that's not unusual, is it? Good morning, Mahesh. Good morning. Good morning. Great to see you all on board. Well, it could be CapM putting a load on it, but actually I'm not running anything at the moment. I think the problem is that I've got this 4K monitor right in front of me, and I left it at the sort of the standard default resolution, which is like 1,000,000 pixels by 1,000,000 pixels, something crazy. And I started OBS, and then when I went live, started pushing the stream to the Twitch ingest servers, I was getting loads of dropped frames. Just now, 5 minutes ago. So I thought, oh my goodness, because the resolution is the same, even when I suppose make scale the resolution on scale the display on macOS. But I didn't restart OBS because OBS takes ages to start. And so OBS, I think, is still struggling with something. I don't know. Anyway, we'll keep going. We'll keep going. And I think actually once I move away from this large video where lots of things are moving all the time, I should stop moving my hand really, then maybe it'll be even better. I don't know. Good morning, Leo. Good morning, Leo. Right, I'm gonna have some coffee from my SAP Coffee Corner Radio podcast mug, as usual. I've gone for an AeroPress based coffee this morning, just for a change. Anyway, I keep looking at my phone, but I'll put the phone that way. Right, let's get started. So what I want to do is jump straight in to where we left off last week. We left the end of the episode on a bit of a cliffhanger, didn't we? And I've sort of reproduced that. I've got this directory called live stream, and I've got EP, NN, episode 34, episode 35, etc. as directories in there. I've just copied across to episode 35, so everything's clean. But I've copied across the thing in this broken state where I couldn't figure out what was going on. Anyway, some of you did see on Twitter 5 minutes later, oh yeah, I found what I was doing wrong. Yeah, we'll go through that and then carry on looking at actions and functions. I did some digging yesterday, and there's quite a lot to learn about. So we'll learn it together, and we'll just do a bit of hacking as well, just to see if we can put some things together and understand a little bit more. So there we go. Let me switch to my main desktop, and I should be able to see up there. There we go. Ah, now that's interesting. Can you see it's not scaled correctly, is it? It's not scaled correctly. Hold on a minute. This was me messing around with the display capture. Ah, there we go. Yes, display capture. Undo that so I can move it, hopefully. Not quite sure why. Display capture is, oh, what's going on? Maybe I'll move it. Yeah, I'll just do that anyway. I'm not sure why that is. What's going on? Sometimes I really. Oh, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll drag this up here. There we go. And now if I drag it down even more. There we go. What am I doing? Oh, there we go. Right. Is that about right? I'll make it a little bit smaller. Sorry about this, folks. There. I think that's probably okay, isn't it? When I tell you that learning about this whole live streaming was quite an uphill journey, you will believe me, maybe. I'm just going to leave it like that. Don't worry about those things there. There we go. Okay. Head about a group. Okay. Much better. Thanks, Srikanth. Let me go to my desktop 1. Srikanth, can you also let me know whether it's still okay? That was a bit weird, wasn't it? Is the video buffering used? I can still see in the video preview the results of me messing around here. Okay, thanks Srikanth, and thanks everybody for your patience there. Yeah, me and OBS sometimes like, whoa, what's going on? Anyway, where we left off is if we have a look at our project, our little bookshop project. Wow, the CPU is just going crazy. If we have a look at our little bookshop project, we've got in our services.cds file, we defined this function here. The function on line 16, okay, that is this calc function, and it takes 2 parameters, 2 integers, and also returns this sort of type that we defined on the fly. Okay, so that's what we had defined, and the implementation of that was, of course, in services.js. Okay, in fact, let's have them both there. Let's have them both. In fact, let's quit out of there. Let's go into just like this, service.cds, and also we'll have service.js there, and we'll have a browser window open as well. Okay, that's great. So that's what we've got for the definition of the function. So this, I'm going to say this is a function, and it's an unbound function. I'll use the word unbound, and I'll come to why it's unbound shortly and what that implies. And the implementation of that function, what we had is down here, right? So we had this serve.on calc. So obviously we're used to seeing, by the way, is that, I've just noticed, is that screen a little bit too far off to the right there? It seems to be cut off. Let me just go here and make it a little bit smaller. There we go. I think that's probably better, isn't it? Okay, right. I'll stop messing around with OBS now. Dear me, one of those days, isn't it? So we had this definition, and unlike if we have a look here, of course, normally we're used to seeing the operations, the read, update, delete, create, etc. And the second parameter to these hooks are hook definitions are the entity types, of course. So down here, though, for the function definition, we just have the function name, right? So we can see there's calc and calc, right? Now, this machine is running really, really, really slow. And what the problem was when we run it, in fact, let's just create a new tmux session and give it a name, episode 35, so we can actually go into bookshop, and npx will have that run start. Yeah, there we go, that'll do. Perfect. And we will define here, let's go into here, services, service.cds, and we'll also have, of course, service.js. Make that a little bit smaller. So now, if we go across to localhost 4004, that's big, we should see that. And if we now add catalog calc, and what we were doing was a equals 1, b equals 2, and that was the error. Oh, what am I doing? Yeah, what we had was that. Okay, that's what we had at the end of last week's episode. And the problem was that I suppose if we'd have looked at the error message in a bit more detail, position 10 is basically where that space is. So that was the first problem. So there's the URI encoded space, %20, ASCII 20. ASCII hex 20, I suppose that is, isn't it? No. 32 in decimal, yeah, I think it's space. So now, removing the space caused us to have, or is causing us to have, another error. And that error is a serialization error. And what we can see here is some sort of an error code into a complex value. We get a slightly different, or a bit more here. Look, invalid value, object, error, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so it turns out, of course, that my brain was dead on Friday last week. And of course, the way you define your callback, your event hook callback, is you don't give it the parameters it's expecting. That's silly, you know, that's sort of very specific. What you want instead is the request parameter. Okay, so this function definition takes, or is given a single, well, it's actually given two things, but for the sake of this discussion, is given a single big lump of stuff, which is the request, the incoming request. So now I've modified that, saved it, it's restarted. If we go back over here, we should see, what's going on? Ooh. So go over here. Oh, of course, yeah. Duh. Right, so request.data.a, request.data.b, and we'll have a look a little bit more at this data property shortly. So let's go across to here again and refresh that. There we go, finally. Okay, that was an incredibly bumpy start, wasn't it? Are you all still with? Let me know. The last thing I'm seeing from the chat is Srikanth saying that the screen looks okay now. So please somebody say something on the channel just to make sure that everything is still okay from a viewing perspective. And I'll carry on. So that was really the definition of a function. Now let's remind ourselves of what that definition looks like in the metadata. If we have a look at the metadata itself, we can see that we've got here in the entity container, we've got the entity set for authors, and we've got the entity set for books, referring to the entity type, for example, books, prefixed by the catalog service namespace, which will come into play shortly. I found this out yesterday. And then we've also got this function import definition. So this is the closest we're going to get to what we know and love from OData v2. Hey John, welcome, and thanks for letting me know. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll carry on. Brilliant. What we get with OData v4 though, for this function import, is also down here, we get a sort of a definition. In the list of stuff here, we get the entity type authors, the entity type books, this complex type, which refers to this type that I've defined over here. And we now get this definition of the calc function. There's a couple of attributes that are interesting for us here. Is bound and is composable. We'll leave is composable for now, but is bound is really interesting. Is bound equals false, as in this function is not bound. Now let's come back to what that means in a second. You can see that it's got the two parameters reflected, a and b, and they're both integers, and it also has this return type, catalog service.myResult, which is of course, let's go over here and let's move down a little bit. In fact, I can move that back up again. I was wondering what was going on with the, let's make that a bit smaller. I was wondering what was going on with the error before. Yeah, there we go, right. There, so we've got that returns my result, which is defined by this type here. Okay, so that's all good. What bound means is this function a function that you call in relation to an entity? Okay, so as we know from OData v2, function imports were never bound specifically to entities. They were just there. They were just these, and I always referred to them as like these sort of ugly carbuncles on the side of the otherwise beautiful sort of RESTful OData protocol. And that's sort of still relatively true. But anyway, what bound means is that a function or an action, which we'll come to action shortly, can be related specifically and called in the context of an entity. So why don't we, for the sake of illustration, modify the definition of this service. In fact, I'll get rid of this stuff here because we don't really want this context or the type. Let's get rid of the type as well. We don't really want that type. Returns, we'll have it returning a string, right? There we go. That is going to rerun, that's fine, but we'll leave it for now. So in order to make a function or an action be defined as being bound to an entity, you have to put it in a clause at the end of that entity's declaration in the service document. So did I say service document? In the service definition. And also in messing around with this, just to figure out things in my brain, I noticed that semicolons aren't necessarily required. So that thing there, we can get rid of that semicolon and I get no errors. If I get rid of that, of course, you can see the error checking is still working there, but we don't need semicolons at the end of each line. What we do need semicolons for is to separate definitions, right? So there's a subtle difference. So let's think about this in terms of the clause that we need to write. So we have to write this clause called actions. It's in the documentation. And by the way, got some really exciting news. There's some really awesome documentation coming our way pretty soon. Whether it will be before TechEd, I'm not sure. TechEd Las Vegas, I'm not sure. But oh my goodness, it's wonderful. So let's put that there. So we need an actions clause. However, and this is where I found out about the semicolon. However, this actions clause belongs to the entity definition. So by putting the semicolon here, finally, yes, finally, Henrik. I mean, the documentation on the SAP Help portal has been pretty good for us to get going, but we need some more meaty documentation, right? Oh, Gregor, you used a secret word, capire. Which of course is Italian for to understand, which is lovely. Lovely sort of play on words with cap. Yes, cap hire for the public. Have I told you about cap hire? How do you know about cap hire? It's pretty cool. But yes, cap hire or capire. I think I just said cap hire. That is coming, which is awesome. So anyway, there is the semicolon. Let me make that a little bit bigger again. There is the semicolon, and once I remove that, the actions subclause are, of course, the customer engagement initiative. Yes, the subclause now suddenly is valid. Hey, some programming dude. Good morning. How are you? Welcome to the live stream. Yeah, it's great to see you all here. By the way, ask any questions. Of course, interrupt me at all times. I know I do talk a lot, but obviously I've got to talk because it's a live stream. Anyways, DJ, stop rambling and get on with it. What time is it? Oh, it's only 8:20. That's good. By the way, if anybody wants to have a live stream on the way that I've riced my desktop using the Chunk window manager, which is a binary space partition tiling window manager, and using the simple hotkey daemon, let me know. We'll do one of those on Wednesday, I think, in one of those sort of alternative ones. Anyway, so we've got now no semicolon at the end of this line here, and that means we can add this actions clause. Okay, I'll put a semicolon at the end of the actions clause to say, well, that's the end of that one. But now I'll move this up into there. Okay, so in fact, I'll copy it so we can compare and contrast. And let's call this Calcbound and call this Calcunbound. Okay. Now, that's not going to work because, of course, I've modified the names of these functions, and of course that error up at the top there refers to the fact that I've got this definition for the Calc function, which doesn't exist anymore, right? That's this element Calc is not defined in the model, but we'll sort that out shortly. We'll leave the what it takes and what it returns for now, but we'll look into how and what we get in the callback for Calcbound with some debugging. I think I should also get into Chunk WM. I've used Awesome and i3 on Linux before. Well, okay, so if you've used Awesome and i3 on Linux, I'm very jealous because if you can use those things. Did you use BSPWM? Because Chunk WM is based upon BSPWM, binary space partition window manager. No actions or functions with relations to two or more entities, I guess. That's correct. However, you can still reach other entities, of course, within the context of the runtime of the callback. But maybe we'll dig into that as well. So why don't we modify this? Let's go here, calc. In fact, let's get rid of that first of all. We don't need the implementation. What I want to do at the moment is just have a look at the metadata definition, right? So if we refresh this now, let's have a look what we've got. We've got still this function import declaration, let's call it, within the entity container for the unbound calc function, okay? And that refers to this catalog service.calcunbound, which is down here, right? And that's the same as before, right? Exactly the same. It takes an A and a B, both integers, and it returns a string. But we've also now, not inside the entity container, because I think this is supposed to, I think, parallel the old OData v2 function imports, but now we've got this bound function called Calcbound, and that's just sitting there alongside, you know, its brother or its sister, Calcunbound. There it is, Calcbound. Is bound equals true. And what is it bound to? It's bound to the author's entity. Now, that is with a parameter called in. We don't actually use the parameter in explicitly. That comes, am I offline? No. That comes, oh, is that the, no, I'm sure I'm not offline. That comes from the context of the URL path that we call. Okay. There we go. Okay, fine. Everything seems to be working okay. My status is telling me that the resolution of what's being streamed is very low. So please tell me if the resolution is okay. All sorts of OBS and Twitch issues today, not sure. Like the classic submitting header and items with each. Ah, yes, exactly, yeah. Some sort of deep insert action, yes. Okay, thanks, Gregor, all okay. I think it must be just my monitor up there that's, I don't know, it's a Chrome bit. Anyway, yeah, I've got a Chrome bit plugged into the back of a TV, and that's on the wall because that usually has my tasks and to-dos and calendars and stuff. Anyway. So we've got this, and we'll now sort of flesh out a very simple definition for the bound calculation, the Calcbound function. Now, by the way, we haven't got to actions yet, but the key thing about functions in OData v4, and you can find this on the OData v4 protocol specification, which is a huge long document, because OData v4 is an ISO standard now, which is pretty damn cool. Functions must return some data and must not have any side effects. So functions are basically read-only things that return data, and by inference, and you know, as it is actually, functions are invoked with the HTTP method get, as opposed to actions, and actions may return some data but may not. So for example, you know, when you don't return data, that's going to be like an HTTP status code 204 no content, or maybe a 201 created, or whatever, right? So of course you can have an HTTP response with no data, nothing in the payload coming back in the response. And as well as that, actions may have side effects. Okay, so you can do read-write stuff with actions, just like you could do with function import. So there's a clear distinction between functions which are read-only and actions which are not read-only. And also by inference, you invoke actions with HTTP post. So that's why at the moment we're using functions, because we can do that on the URL bar here in Chrome and the omnibar. So we'll do that first. Okay, 8:20, we're doing all right for time this time. I don't have to rush. So I'm going to say, what's it called? Calcbound. Now, if I return, it returns a string, so we'll say hello world. Now, this will fail. And the reason this will fail is because, let's just try it. Oh, there we go. Calcbound, yes, element calcbound. Oh, I saved that. That's an interesting error. I didn't think it was going to fail with that error. Element calcbound is not defined in the model. Now, that what I was getting at is that while we defined the calc previously, like this, because this is a bound function, we also need to specify the entity name to which this function is bound, i.e., whoops, what? Oh well, calc bound, we need to specify the entity, which is authors. Let's just return it. There. Let's try that. There we go. So there's the difference. And also, as you can notice, probably, that looks very, very similar to the pattern that we have for the regular event hooks, you know, for the read, update, create and delete and everything. So let's try that. So let's go across to here and try that. We've tried the calc already, or the unbound. In fact, why don't we just define the unbound as well? Okay, so let's do a serve.on calc unbound. And that's not going to be on anything in particular, so we get rid of that. And hello unbound world bound world. You can tell I'm making this up as I go along, right? So there we go, there's our definition. Let's go across to here and go to that one there. We've got, let's just edit that. There's our catalog, and now we'll say calc unbound, and we've still got to supply the things here. A equals 1, B equals 2, maybe I'll get rid of those. There we go, there's hello unbound world, so nothing different. So now, how does this bound thing work? So let's just go and edit that. If we say, for example, authors, what? Yeah, catalog authors, let's go back. What's going on? Authors. Oh, yes. I want to get rid of this this implementation as well, don't I? Yeah, 1 second. Let me go back here and there. We don't want this implementation. That's all we need. Run that, come on. There we go, there's our authors. Okay, so there's our authors. So now we can say, for example, of course, as well, authors of 42, obviously 42, Douglas Adams. And now in the context of this particular author, we can say, now, and I'll do this deliberately incorrectly, first of all, calc unbound, calc bound, A equals 1, B equals 2. Now, we get this error message, property calc bound does not exist in type authors. Okay, now before we look at that, I've just seen that, oh, Fabian, good morning. So you can define actions as well as functions within an entity. Yes, you can. So as you can see here, we've got this actions clause. I'm not sure whether the clause is the right word, but anyway, I'm going to use this actions clause, and it's sort of connected to the entity definition here because there's no semicolon at the end of entity. Okay, so you have to define it as the last thing in the entity declaration. But you could also have action blah 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 blah, right? But oh, in fact, semicolon, action, banana, blah 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 blah. Okay. So hope that answers your question, Fabian. Good question, by the way. Keep asking the questions. I may not be able to answer them. I have no idea what I'm doing. However, I do know through trial and error and like what the hell is going on, that and looking at the documentation on the OData protocol, that you need to specify bound functions with their fully qualified name. Who knew? So if we have a look at that, if we go to the metadata, the fully qualified name of Calcunbound bound is Calcunbound within this schema namespace catalog service. Okay, so we have to say catalog service dot calcbound. There we go. Hello bound world. Okay, so is that clear? Are we clear? Perfect. Thanks Fabian. That was weird. I didn't see you'd said clear there. I was saying is that clear in terms of this thing here. So there we go. There's a bound function. Now that's not very exciting because of course we're just returning a string. So why don't we now debug and have a look what data we get in the request object. Okay, so yeah, let's do that, because then we can see hopefully the context, or at least well, what's the point in having a bound function if when processing that bound function you've no idea what context, what entity context you're executing in, right? That's my sort of first question anyway, so let's have a look at that. So what we'll have to do is modify this, and we'll have a debugger statement here, and then we'll just return something for now, x. That'll do. So that's fine. Now let everybody in the chat let me know when you're hacking around on cap stuff, Node.js flavored cap stuff. Are you using VS Code? Do you use the debugger? I use VS Code as well, but I also like to use, and I mentioned this last week as well, I also like to use other tools, e.g. Vim and so on, and tmux and blah blah blah. Nothing against VS Code, it's awesome, but I want to not train myself, I want to learn more about inspecting and debugging Node processes with the Chrome debugger, because I feel completely at home in the Chrome developer tools. So that's the reason I'm doing it this way. So yeah, let's do it that way. So I've now got a debugger statement there. What I need to do, I guess, is go into package.json, in fact, and what I'll do is I'll add, let's do this properly, right? So we want node, now the -- inspect -break flag says start running this process in debug mode and stop at the very first statement. Okay, and I like doing that because it just sort of gives you a chance to sort of take a breath before you dive in. Okay, that's really what I do that for. If you don't want it to stop on the very first statement, you just say -- inspect. Okay, so inspect break, and this is what we did this last week, so I'm not going to explain this again. Basically we need, of course, what is the node process, what is the node code that we want to run in with this debug mode. It's basically the CDS executable, which is written in Node. Rather than try and put the fully qualified path name, of course we can just say the result of backticks. This is perfect normal Unix shell style, which, as in which will tell us where the following command is, where it lives, what fully qualified directory path it lives in, and its name itself, which CDS. Let me explain what that means for those of you who are not sure. Let's make that bigger. In fact, yes, I just realized that I can just go boing and make that a little bit bigger in terms of the size of the terminal window. By the way, the delay with the border when the terminal window got bigger is because my CPU is still like mega. So I have no idea what's going on. So if I say CDS, we get that right, but where is this CDS command? We say which CDS, it tells us the answer. Users, i347, blah, blah, blah. You can see the cursor is really slow. NVM versions, blah, 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 blah. Okay, and the CDS version, by the way, I think Gregor mentioned this, tweeted this, didn't you, Gregor? 316.2. Was it? Yeah, .2. So we can say now, file will tell us what type of file it is, I think, and then we can say file which CDS. So it will do a file command on that /users i347 blah 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 CDS. It is a no script text executable. Okay, so that's the backtick thing. Terminal. The future is terminal. There we go. Okay, so let's go back here and finish that off with run. Okay, so that's our command that we want in our little script stanza in package.json. So we can now say npm run debug. There we go. So now it's running node inspect break on wherever CDS is with the run parameter passed to CDS. Now we can go across to the browser, and in fact let's bring up a new window instead, and say Chrome inspect, and we should be able to find, there it is right down at the bottom. Can you see that? Is my face in the way? This remote target, which is a node v1016 target inspect. So we can run inspect. I'm going to close that, and I'm also going to make that a little bit bigger as well. There we go. In fact, why don't I do this as well? Yeah, make it that size again. So as you can see, where we've stopped, let's make that one smaller, where we've stopped is right at the start of the cds.js, which is exactly what we asked it to do for us. So far so good. And we've also got over here, we've also got down here this debugger statement, which of course is a JavaScript thing, and Node.js will stop hopefully on that debugger statement. So there we go. Oh, nice chat, awesome. All I can see is the last one I can see is from, oh, it's gone. I've got my other keyboard here which is controlling that thing, which is cheap keyboard. So let me just go up there and make it a little bit smaller. There we go, thank you. Yes, make it a little bit smaller, Control minus. So Henrik, so even though it is bound within an entity, it still needs to be unique within the namespace, so no multiple submits. Exactly, yes. And I think that's why, yeah, very good point, Henrik. And I think that's why it's important that the v4 version of OData sort of embrace the namespace, the schema namespace, because it makes a lot of sense, right? At design time, you can define actions as well as functions, but doing the right thing, actions for side effect functions and functions for side effect free functions, what a sentence, is up to the developer. Yes, that's something we should actually try out. You know, can we, you know, what will the node runtime of cap do if we try to modify something within the context of an event callback that has been defined for a function? We should try that, definitely. Try the Chrome developer tools as you showed last week. Great, it is, it's awesome. I love it. I think I got to know the Chrome developer tools when I was learning and working with UI5 a while ago. They're brilliant. Edge beta based on Chromium, not much difference though. Edge beta, yeah, Edge. But yeah, it's Chromium based, so it's cool. Found out that some error messages are truncated. Yes, some error messages are truncated, Helmut, and also one thing I don't know why, but I just prefer, it feels more comfortable typing and doing stuff in this sort of console here, which of course you can have full screen when you're debugging, and in the VS Code you've only got that single line. It's more like the Firefox debugger. I seem to remember. So that's another reason why I like that. Early use of VS Code with your Chrome stuff is something which I'm using. It's all familiar. Yes, exactly. It's familiar. Oh, yes. Oh, you did it on Slack. Okay, thank you. Yes. Okay. By the way, oh no, it wasn't you, Gregor. You answered or you confirmed that error that Pierre, that weird sort of Boolean error. I did do some debugging. I came across that a while ago, and it's basically the way that the values from the CSV are pulled out, in parsing the CSV and then used in the insert to the SQLite. So I'll put something in that, I'm sure you can find it. I put something in the answer to Pierre's question, which is a workaround maybe. Well, no, it is a workaround as in it works. Whether we should want it to use true or false, I think we do, then is another question. Anyway, where were we? Okay, we're about to debug. So we're just at the start here, and as you can see, we've not got to the part yet where it says, started listening on localhost 4004. That's because it's paused. So let's just carry on. And as we can see here, connect to data source, and so on. Oh, we can also see it down here as well. There we go. Serving catalog service, and again the delay is because I don't even want to switch back to OBS because of course it's going to be a big screen busyness that OBS is going to have to cope with then to display it. But I reckon my CPU is running still around 60%. Yeah, can't wait to stop OBS. So we're now running. So this should now work again. We can refresh, and now we hit the debugger. In fact, we can get rid of this because we don't really need the navigator. So yeah, I think this is just very comfortable. So now we can see down here, we can see the request object, and that's a huge thing. So let's just take it one bit at a time. Remember that we passed in the value of 1 for A and the value of 2 for B. So let's see where those were, because we've seen those already. We've seen how to get them. Rec.data. There we go. So we can get to the rec.data. What else is in the rec request? It's an event emitter. We've also got, and this is something that I'm sure lots of people, including Gregor, will be interested in. We've got excuse me, we've got the user. Of course, we're not doing any sort of mocking of authentication or authorization or anything, but you've got the user stanza here. And yeah, there's all sorts of stuff. I've not really looked into much of this, but what we do have is the query object. So if we say here rec.query, now what is that? Well, of course, this is what's the word I'm looking for? This is a programmatic version of the query that was constructed on the basis of the request for the particular entity, which is the context of this function runtime. Right? Does that make sense? Oh, thank you, Gregor. That's the link to the Boolean topic. Yes, exactly. So we can see here that we've chosen to run the catalog service Calcunbound in the context of authors brackets 42, as in authors with ID 42, which of course is Douglas Adams, as we all know. And this, it turns out, reflects that, okay, in this sort of CDS query language representation. Select from catalog service.authors, this reference where, and we saw a little bit of this last week where we constructed this effectively SQL statement, but it wasn't SQL as in, how we would normally see SQL, but it was SQL in the form of an object, okay? So we can say here, cds.run, okay, there we go, select from my bookshop's authors, then console log. Let's do that first, and this is a normal SQL statement. Okay, so the promise is pending. Now when we let go, as in when we run, we get the result back, x, which came from here, return x, so we did an F11, I think, F11 is it? F8, I don't know. And continued, that returns X, which comes back to here. But we also get in the console the result of this manual sort of raw SQL statement, which is quite cool. But of course, that isn't what we're talking about here. That's not the context of the author within which we're running. So let's do that now. We can say, well, why don't we do it here, right? So let's do it again. Okay, so we're now at the debugger again. Let's go here and say cds run rec.query. Okay, so this will, cds run will take a string, a SQL string, but it will also take this sort of constructed object style. Okay, we get a promise. What's happening to my, hello? No idea what. Okay, we get a promise, which is pending. We'll actually let go and we'll say continue, resume script execution. We get the X back there, and you can see it over here actually. We get the data that is the context in which this function is running. Demo fixed with, what's that demo? Oh, what? Is that the, Gregor, is that the Boolean thing, or is that the other thing that we were looking at? I can't remember. Let me go to, somebody just coming through the door. Let me go to, oh, it's the Boolean one. Ah, okay, so you've got that. Oh, I thought it was Pierre's repo. Is it your repo? Did you copy it or something? Okay, anyway, that's cool. The demo's fixed. Thanks, Gregor. Okay, so where were we? Yes, so we get the context of the entity that we're running this this bound function within through the rec.query. So why don't we use that? Yeah, why don't we use that and go over here and say, for example, Calcbound. Let's go up here and say Calcbound. Oh, okay. Why don't we do this? Well, there was something interesting in the last 8 minutes. So why don't we say instead truncated name. So it's a bit weird, but you know, it sort of makes a little bit more sense. We'll say length integer returns, well, we can say returns string. So what I want to do is say, well, let's have this bound function called truncated name that will be run in the context of an author's entity, because it's bound to the author's entity, and it will return, like, you know, the author's name to, you know, n or l length characters. Okay, that'll do. So it will allow us to grab hold of, or it will cause us to have to grab hold of the name property of the author in question, and then use the incoming value from L to truncate that. Okay, you know, using substring or whatever. So let's do that. So, but in fact, I'm just wondering now, just thinking of author and the name property, we're going to return string. Well, let's leave it. Yeah, what I want to try is returns author. It just feels. Oh, there we go. Look. So the language server protocol is allowing us, as it were, authors, allowing us to specify a property that's within an entity definition. So I'm assuming that that effectively is like saying returns something of the same type of the authors.name property. So let's just try that. It just feels right. Let's go down here and it's now called what? Truncated name. And because all these things are asynchronous, we want to well, we don't have to, but it's nice to be able to grab hold of the results of this running the query to get the author's name, Douglas Adams, in this case, and have a look at it. So what I would say, this is an asynchronous function, which means we can use the await keyword. Is it a keyword, a decorator? To say, well, run this and wait for the promise to be resolved and get the answer. So let's say const data, imaginative variable name there, equals await cds.run rec.query. Okay, this is nothing we've not done before. Query return, well, let's return a string for now anyway, banana. That'll do. And oops, save that as well. And let's go back up here because I'm not running npx. Let's do that. Oh yeah, let's do that again. Run debug. There we go. So we want the developer tools again. Inspect. Yep, it's waiting. There we go. Let's close that. Make that a little bit bigger. Okay, good. Even bigger, I'd say. There we go. So now let's continue. Okay, and now it's ready to receive requests. Let's go back up here, and now let's put this new function name in, which is called catalog service.truncated name length equals 4. I don't know. Right. Right, okay, we're on, sorry, it's like, is it run? We're on the debugger. Okay, cool. So const data equals await cds run.rec.query. Rec.query is our select. So let's just have that return. What I meant to do there, let's put a breakpoint. Let's run that again. And that should hit that breakpoint now. Yeah, cool. Okay, so now we've got the data. There's Douglas Adams. And notice the data is in an array, right? Okay, I think that it will always return an array. There's only one. So now we could say, for example, you know, what we want to return is data. The first one of data name dot substring 0 rec dot data dot length L. Cool. That's what we want to return, right? So, yeah. Let's just run that to completion. I think the other cool thing about this, I'm just thinking, is that we can modify the code on the fly, can't we? So we can say, sorry, I'm not in VI mode here on my keyboard. Return, there we go, yeah, return data dot, what was it? Data dot name dot substring from 0 to rec dot data dot L. Will that work? Let's be brave. Let's get rid of this debugger statement. Save that. Go up here. It worked. That's pretty cool. Right. That's really good. I'm surprised myself, actually. So yeah, there's another advantage of using the Chrome developer tools, because of course you get access to the coding and module. Maybe you can do that in VS Code as well. I don't know, but this just seems really, really comfortable. Mahesh, I got it. CDS run and query parameters will do that job exactly. Okay, so you forked it from yes. Right. Okay, cool. Right. Okay, folks. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you found that okay. Sorry about the weirdness with OBS at the start, but we got there in the end, didn't we? Yeah, I need to look into that a little bit. Now, Pete, I will ping you on Twitter direct message. Shortly after this, I'm going to get a cup of tea first, we can talk about tomorrow in Sidetrack. I think my session is at 6:30 in the morning, isn't it? So we're good. That's like mid-morning for me, so that's all fine. So again, thanks for joining. I'll see you next time. Thanks for making it a really interactive session, and see you soon. Bye for now.